won. And well, finally, Joe, we've done it. Been meaning to get you back on my channel for a while. It's gonna have like I was like, yo, Joe, you want to talk about Invincible with me and a friend of mine? You're like, yeah, and which I'm still hoping to do. I don't
That's
know
right.
when
I
we're gonna
reread
do
the whole
that.
series for that, and it never happened.
Yeah, no, that's yeah.
that
I'm still gonna do it, but I just you know
was fun. It was good. I enjoyed the reread at least.
um. Then we're having a thing with my friend Amanda about like self pub and all that. That hadn't come through yet, but we're finally here
We'll
talking
come through
about
with it. Yeah.
Joe's book, Wistful Ascending, which you got right
Oh yeah.
here.
Oh yeah.
Copy,
Stereo. Right.
copy, provide graciously provided by the author.
There you go.
Um, so yeah, um, I liked it a lot. I mean,
Good.
I remember you kind of chafed when I said I was gonna read this as like a palate cleanser. You were like, "Well, there's still some like there's still some stuff in there," and I'm like, "I'm sure there is." I'm just like,
Okay.
it
Okay.
looks like a
Well,
fun read as well as I mean, I don't know. Like, let me read it at least. I'm just reading it.
it's all good. It's
So
all
I
good.
so I put it off
All can
till
have readers.
so I put it off till like I was gonna do it in like February or March.
Uh-huh.
And then some other books got in the way and
That
other
happens.
stuff in my life. And then April came
Oh
around. I'm
yeah.
like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna read Wistful Ascending. I finally did, and I liked it.
There you go.
So
Good. I'm glad.
good work,
That's
Joe.
the goal. Goal is for people to like the book. So
Yeah.
we've been unlocked.
Um. Yeah. I guess my first question before we really get into talking about Wistful Ascending, which I
Go for
mean,
it.
go read this before you watch this because we're probably gonna spoil the whole thing.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert. We're probably going
Um.
to spoil things.
Yeah.
That's a good
Um.
thing to point out because sometimes I forget. You just get into it.
Um. So I get because I remember I mean this wasn't really like this wasn't too serious, but I was just kind of like this is gonna be kind of weird because I'm used to reading superhero comics as opposed to
Yeah.
superhero novels. So I wanted to I don't know, I'm sure you've answered this type of question before. Why didn't you make it into a comic? I mean, like my guy, you got like fat stacks as far as I'm compared. You're cranking out books like it's going out of style, man.
I can't draw.
Well, I mean, I'm like, well, you didn't. What did you not want to pay for someone else to draw, or did you just decide to?
I mean, look, okay. I mean, getting someone else to draw like, because okay, if you think about,
I guess my point is, why did you make it a novel instead of a comic? I am
I
curious about that.
not no joke. I mean, I'm not really. It may have sound flippant, but I mean, I wasn't really trying to be. I wasn't really trying to kid around. I can't draw, but I can write at least okay. And like I wasn't going to learn how to draw. I've tried to learn how to draw. Like I've tried to teach myself to draw comics. I don't have like the patience or the manual dexterity. Or I mean, I'm sure if I spent enough hours at it, I could be fair. I think anyone can be okay if they spend enough time studying it. But I was like, I'd rather spend that time being better at writing. The other problem is like if you think about the number of events that happen in this book, I can crank out two of these books a year. Okay. And if you think about it, telling that amount of story in a comic book form, I'm not even sure 12 issues would have covered what happens in Wistful Ascending of a regular comic.
Yeah, I will say there was a lot going on in this book.
A lot going on. So I never actually scripted it out. So I don't know how many issues it would take, but it wouldn't be like three comic issues, right?
Oh,
With the
I
same kind of
imagine
story.
not.
It'd be a lot, right? Which means that, even if I could pay for a monthly schedule, and that's really almost paying an artist to work on it full time, which I can't afford. Like there's no way I could tell the scope of story I wanted to tell. Like you think about a comic like Cerebus or something. That was a 25-year project, right? Like 300 issues. Like I admire that, but I don't have 25 years left. I'm an old man, like 25 years from now,
I
I
have
can't,
cold
I can't.
sweats just thinking about how much time and effort it took to put that together.
Yeah, but he
God.
drew it himself, right? But I can't start a 25-year project now, and I also feel like finding an artist who could commit to even like a 10-year project. That's never gonna. If I had like, I could see a scenario where I had like a best friend from college who loved the same kind of stories I did and was really good at art, and we worked on it together. Like that's a collaboration, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a worthwhile thing. But I don't have someone like that, and also I don't really want to give up creative control. Like I have very clear images in my mind of what these characters look like and their facial expressions, and I have a hard time looking at the covers, like having the covers done. The covers are great. Chris McGrath is a phenomenal artist, but he gets details that aren't quite what I want, and I'm like I can live with it for a cover, but I don't know if I can live with it for like the actual body of the story, you know?
All
Because
right, all right.
it's a collaboration, and that's a different skill set, right? To be a good collaborator.
I
And I
mean,
never
I guess I was
pretended to have it.
I wanted to ask you that before we got into because I was
Yeah.
genuine. Well, for one, I was just genuinely curious.
Yeah, you can ask whatever, man. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
I mean, I don't know if other people have asked you though, so that's why I was kind of
People
like,
ask me if I would like to see a comic adaptation, and like it'd be cool, but it's not really on my bucket list. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that I think would be cool if they happen, or would you know? But you have to also accept what's really like. I am not going to fund a comic book. Like I think that would be tens of thousands of dollars, and I don't
oh,
have that.
dude, I've tried putting comics together, and well, I mean, I'm 23, and I have chump change compared to what you probably make. Um,
Well, yeah.
I mean,
I'm 53. I'm a professional. Like I'm sure I make more money than a typical college student while they're in
yeah,
college.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll put it this way. I found that putting comics together is an extremely difficult process. Oh my
And
god.
it's also I'd have to learn a lot. Like I don't know how to
Like
lay
if
out
you're
a
an
comic.
artist, you have a better deal
Yeah,
because
yeah.
everyone's looking for you to do the
Right.
drawing for them.
And if
When
I
you're
can
a
draw
writer, you're
myself,
screwed. You know, you have to like.
but you have to think about it. I mean, if I was trying to learn how to even learning how to manage a comic book project, not even do the art myself, but learn, like, I don't know how to script a comic book page. I've never seen one. I mean, I'm sure I could learn if I spent enough time and money on it. But that's time and money that I could otherwise spend on like writing more stories or like learning how to be a better writer of prose, you know. So it's not really on my bucket list. I don't know why. I mean, you'd think it would be. I would like to get some real comic book like art, like from real comic book artists of my characters to use as like inserts and stuff. Like I'd love to
Oh,
get Steve Rude to
fan
do a
art.
Rohan.
I hear you. I hear you.
But no, but like pay Steve Rude to do Rohan, right? Steve Rude's a guy who drew Nexus. He's done like Space Ghost. Like he was a big influence on me. His art is a big influence on how I like see the characters.
Wait, do you mean Are you talking about Daniel Warren Johnson or someone else?
I'm talking about Steve Rude.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Steve Rude. No, it's okay. So
I don't
Steve
know who
Rude,
that is,
he
unfortunately.
drew Nexus. Nexus was a sort of visually, it was a comic about a guy flying through space, and you know,
Oh yeah. Okay.
very heavily influenced by Space Ghost, which was a different. And then he ended up drawing like another limited series that was like based on like Space Ghosts.
Yeah, I
Like you
remember I
know,
was reading this and I looked at Toth 3 and I was just like, it's gonna be. I'm gonna just go for it. And I'm like, hey Joe, is that like a reference to Alex Toth? And you were like, no.
if it was anything, it was like I was thinking about like planet names, and I was thinking about Star Wars and the Hoth system. And
Like knowing you, I wouldn't have been shocked if you'd been like, let's just pretend I did or something like that. I don't know. Something like that.
there are influences that pop in where you realize that there's something that you're familiar with that comes into your story and you didn't notice it. Like someone once was like, oh, you know, like I think it was Tori Tekken was talking about Rurouni Kenshin, and I started thinking like my character Rohan's a lot like Himura Kenshin, like a lot. And I was not thinking about that consciously when I wrote, but I mean, I love that manga, so like the fact that it's there, I'm sure it was a huge influence on me, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time. It just seeped in.
I mean, I'm not a manga expert. I mean, I've only read like Monster and Death Note. I really like
I read
Cowboy
Death Note.
Bebop. I mean, I wouldn't call this inspired by Cowboy Bebop, unless it was. If it was, I wasn't aware of it, but I didn't
Cowboy
think
Bebop's not on my list of favorites. If it's inspired by stuff, it's the character is inspired by Kenshin. A lot of the action is inspired by Dragon Ball Z
Oh yeah,
to a certain
I
extent.
got I got that. I got like
Yeah.
Invincible. You know, I mean,
Oh,
obviously
Invincible was the most direct influence that made me write this story.
Star Trek. I got a little Star
I
Trek.
would.
I don't know if you like Star Trek. I know you
Oh
mentioned
no, I
Babylon
did.
5, which I
I
haven't
did.
seen,
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of elements of Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine. Just the fact that they're on a space station and some of the concepts I took from those two shows to make the space station wasn't really. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like redoing DS9 or B5.
Well,
Like,
no,
there's a
I'm
difference.
not. I don't want to like imply that, but I got that like the vibe. If you get that,
There,
like I got that vibe.
yeah, 100%. I was taking elements from those places. Probably B5 more than Deep Space Nine.
It's like
'Cause
if Mark from Invincible decided to go to like Deep Space Nine or something. I don't know.
I mean, you hear these examples like it's Harry Dresden in space, right? People comp it, right? It's
I haven't read the Dresden Files, so I don't
okay.
know. But
The tone is very similar in many ways to Harry Dresden, and the structure is very similar to the Dresden Files in that the Dresden Files is really a long series of standalone books, but the story progresses from book to book.
so is Dresden also a wisecracking but secretly
Yeah,
dangerous badass?
yeah. He's not. He's very similar to Rohan, but not the same. But also, definitely wisecracking. A wizard, has magical powers. Is tougher than people think. He's a little more of an underdog than Rohan in most of the scenarios he's in. More surrounded by people much more powerful than him, which is not typically what Rohan's life is like. But there are very strong similarities. But structurally, I took a lot from Jim Butcher. Like the notion of the way I wrote the books, like each book is a standalone with a definite conclusion, like it ends, and then we have the same cover artist, right? That's
Yeah, I
how
was
I got
about
my
to say.
cover artist.
That's why I was like pointing. Like,
Yeah,
you even
no,
know the
I
same guy.
literally I was sitting there. I'm like, I need an artist. I didn't know what the hell I was doing because I didn't know anything about indie publishing. I turned around at my desk, and at the time I had bookshelves behind me. I found one of the Dresden novels. I picked up. I'm like, who did this cover? I like this cover. And I literally emailed Chris, and that was it. That's only I didn't interview anyone else. I just said, "Will you do a cover for me?" And he's like, "Sure, you pay me."
Wow, that was very lucky of you.
I have no idea how I got on his schedule. I mean, he's an artist, right? He works, right? If you pay him, it's a job. He's going to do it. Like it may have been a bad decision in certain ways because part of the problem. I love Chris, but he's very busy. So
Yeah.
it's not. I can't just call him and be like, I need a cover in 2 months, and he's like, done. I'm like, I have to. Can I get a cover in a year? And he's like, I'll try. And he'll tell me things like, "Oh, I'm working on the interior art for the next Dune special release, so I'm going to be a little late." I'm like, "What the hell am I going to do about that?" Right? Like, you should work on that. Really, it's more important. So,
I mean,
tough.
but yeah, this was good. Like I enjoy me some quality superhero stuff, and as much as I like. Another little thing I liked is how you actually lean into the fact, like, no, Marvel and DC exists in this world. This isn't like Watchmen, where superheroes kind of went out once the real thing showed up. You're like, nope,
Yeah,
nope,
yeah,
comics
yeah.
still exist. They're still superheroes.
I've had readers get confused because the whole point of this series is like it's a lot like the Marvel universe, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Earth is very in Marvel. Earth is very similar to our Earth. Just there happen to be superheroes running around, but they don't all have like. It's not like the average person has like Iron Man technology. The average
Mm-hmm.
person drives a regular car still in the Marvel universe, right? They don't have access to like all the super stuff, but they know there are aliens out there with advanced tech. They just don't have it. So like he grew up watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever, stuff like that. He grew up in Canada, so I get to make all the pop culture reference I want. Some people were confused, like I thought this book took place in the distant future. I'm like, no, it's now. There are aliens with high tech. So it let me do a lot of stuff like with the. It made my life easy. It's a cheat, right? You put it in like roughly
Oh no,
contemporary.
I'm not like criticizing it or
No, no,
anything. I
no.
thought it
But
was
it makes
fun. I thought it
but
was
it's deliberate.
neat.
It makes it easier, right? Because I can just say, "Oh, he likes donuts. He went to Tim Hortons Donuts and can't right?" Because that's a donut chain. I don't have to make something up. Like, if I put this book in like it's 1,000 years from now, it's not eating Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons isn't going to last at that. Well, probably isn't going to last 1,000 years. Right? I'd have to make up something new. But this way, I can just make the world as very much like our world, and that makes the world building easier. Like it's just a cheat. So I did it, and it worked. It's like
Oh,
don't
I
make things
liked it
harder
a
than they have
lot.
to be. Yeah,
It was good stuff. So like,
yeah.
did Rohan grow up reading comic books, or was he just kind of?
I don't think I've ever said. I don't imagine he did a ton of that. Um, he probably did some, but not a lot. I'm trying to think because I mean I know stuff about how he was raised. Because the thing is that I mean it's not like a heavy book, but like he is functionally like a child soldier, right? He was
Oh, I
raised,
was about to say no. This book was a breeze. I got
you
through
know,
this in like how long?
but
Three
but
or
but
four
there
days.
are but you have to realize like I mean he was raised to be a soul like he's a child soldier, right? He was literally conceived and raised to be a soldier from the time he was like conceived, right? So he didn't have a normal childhood. It wasn't like, yeah, do what you want. It was like his dad was there saying, no, we have to train you because you are going to work for the. You have to become a soldier when you're older. That's all, and you have to be controlled by us. So that was his whole upbringing, right? Growing
Mm-hmm.
up, and he was being turned into a tool like his whole life. So
Mm-hmm.
that he didn't just have the run of whatever you want to do is fine. Does it serve the empire or not? You know.
Yeah.
So
So basically, the pitch of this is we meet Rohan, which sounds suspiciously like Dragon Ball Z character with a similar sounding name.
it's a very common name in India. It's like Rohan's like the John's. It's like a John, the equivalent of like a name like John in not really in actually where his mother's from, which is kind of a cheat. But I like the name. But I really didn't take it from. I didn't take it from like Lord of the Rings. I didn't even think about it. It never occurred to me that the Rohan's a name in Lord of the Rings until like
Oh, really? I
after the book
forgot
came
about.
out.
I didn't know that either.
After the book came out, and someone said, "Oh, like Lord of the Rings," I'm like, "That's not what I meant." I mean, whatever. But
Well, the
no,
fights definitely seemed like Invincible, Dragon Ball. You know. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Pitch here. Rohan is former soldier of the Ildrak or Ildrak.
Rock.
Ildrak.
Rock.
Thank you. Okay. Ildrak
You
vampire or
don't have to say it. I don't
empire.
think my audiobook narrator called it that. I don't think he made that sound. Maybe he did. I can't remember. I don't really
um.
listen to the audio.
Anyway, he used to be a soldier for that empire,
Mm-hmm.
and I almost called it a vampire. That would have been embarrassing. But so he decides to go to the space station. He's like, you know what? I'm tired of all that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go to the space station. I'm gonna chill out, maybe get a girlfriend.
Yep.
Whatever. I'm gonna tow space trucks for the rest of my life.
As one does, right?
I'm okay. And of
It's the
course,
yeah.
a story's got to happen. So of course, we can't just have a book with him wandering around doing his job, though. You know,
I guess I could. I could do a Legends and Lattes kind of thing where he's just towing ships and like getting coffee, and that's the whole book.
it all
But I did
starts
not do
with
that.
a wormhole.
Yeah. 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 That's a little cheap,
Yeah, I
but
remember.
whatever. You guys
I
know the
remember.
company.
I text you. I'm like, oh wow, so you got some like bear people. This is kind of a
Yeah.
nitpick. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention, but like I remember, like I was reading the bear people talking. I'm like, this just went from like pretty solid English to like broken English. Maybe I
When
don't know.
he when he first meets them, they're speaking their language, which he understands because he can understand any language
Mm-hmm.
because he's got this magical fire speech thing. So they're speaking their language, so it's not broken, right? Perfect
Mm,
grammar because it's their
mm.
own language, so he understands it perfectly.
Oh, I
Once
missed
they
that.
move to the station, they're speaking Drachna. They're like training themselves, and they never quite get the hang of it. So there's a solid break there between when he's speaking to them in Urson and when they're speaking Drachna, then it sounds broken because they don't quite master it because it's a foreign language to them that they just
Oh,
learned.
okay. I didn't.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot
I
all. Oh
thought
man, I
I
forgot all
put
about that.
I put a lot of thought into the languages and what people are saying and who's saying it when and how it sounds
Also, I
and
didn't
how
want
to.
to nitpick. It wasn't like,
You
oh,
can,
book broken. I'm
you
done.
can,
But
you can, but it's not broken when he visits their ship because they're not speaking Drachna yet. They're speaking their own language, which is
mm,
obviously they're perfectly fluent in their own language. They use the correct grammar, so that's how he portrays it
I like
when you read
how
the book.
you don't even bother to try and like figure out what their name is. You just put in unintelligible roar. Had me some chuckles there.
There you go. Good, good.
But
Well, it's
Ro-
always hard to like, how do you portray because you think about it, if you have aliens, they shouldn't all be able to make the same phonemes that we can make, right?
mhm.
So you got to put some different stuff in
Well,
there.
I
I
guess
don't
I was
know.
reminded of Star Trek because of all the like kind of weird alien races, and and Rohan's getting with some alien lady, you know,
Yep.
stuff like that. That's kind of what reminded me of Star Trek. Wasn't
The same,
necessarily
but I
like it
use the
was.
same cheat Star Trek does. Like in Star Trek, there's this backstory where this other I forget the name in Star Trek, but this other race kind of seeded all these planets with like humanoids that then evolved into like, so Vulcans and humans are cousins, right? Like we're distantly related in the Star Trek universe. So I did the same thing. So most of these species were seeded from a few different roots. So they diverged, right? They may have different different superficial characteristics, but they're all related. Because otherwise, it's too hard. It's
But
just hard to write the book, right? If they all have different like anatomy and they're all eating completely different foods, it's just too hard to make the rest. So I'm like, they all eat the same crap and they have sex the same way, and let's make my life eat most of them. I mean, obviously there are some who are like fish or whatever, and they're going to diverge, but all the intelligent creatures are in like just a few categories. So made
yeah,
myself
you
to
know,
cheat.
Rohan, he seems like a normal kind of guy. Just wants to do his job and get out and go to sleep, but he can't.
Well,
Um,
again, if he could, it wouldn't be much of a story.
or is he? Wink, wink.
Yeah.
But no,
Well,
serious. Um, but no, this was good. I remember I was reading this. I'm like, I'm like, oh man. I'm like, oh, you got bear people, and you're like, yeah. And then there's a backstory with the bear people. I'm like, okay, okay.
people so I notice when people talk about these books, like there are characters that no one ever mentions and there are characters that everyone mentions.
Does everyone
Like
mention the bear people?
everyone loves the bear people, like universally. Once in a while someone will get annoyed at the stupid Russian accent, but
I
almost
imagine it
everyone.
in a Russian accent. That's
Yeah,
hilarious. You say
yeah,
that. That's
yeah, yeah. Oh, I wrote that. I spent a lot of time. A bad Russian accent, though, not a real one. A bad Russian, like from a CW show when you've got a Russian guy on like a badly written television show. That's the accent. Um,
that's great. I love
yeah,
that.
but like people really responded to the Ursins, and there's other characters that I really liked, and no one ever says a word about them. Great.
I really liked Renth a lot.
Yeah, a
The
lot of people liked Rinth, and to the point where I was really tempted to make Rinth a bigger part of later books, and I didn't.
Though I'll admit, I did kind of I did kind of snicker when he was like, hey, could I stay friends with Renth? Because that sounds really weird if you don't have the context. I'm like, what? It sounds kind of weird when you're like hear that. You're like, what?
Yeah. Well, he
But
doesn't have a lot. He doesn't have a lot of friends, right? He doesn't have a lot of experience making friends. He really spent 10 years, elbow deep in war, like kill this guy, kill that guy, from one, one situation rushed to the next, constant like combat, and he's damaged from that, right? He's not an okay dude. Like he's not healthy, right?
yeah, I mean, I liked that. I told you this after I finished the book, which I mean, I was about to finish it the night when I finished it, and then my dad's like, "We're gonna go golf. You want to come?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I did that, and then I got home and I finished it, and I was like, "All right, there we go." I'm like, finished it now. But
Yeah.
but yeah, when you think of Rohan at first, you're like, "Oh, he seems like a normal enough guy," and then you realize he has some baggage. I like that he's not super like he has angst, but it's not like it's not like reading a '90s comic book where it's just like, oh my gosh, ugh, put it down, I can't do it.
So that was one of my biggest goals because you have this story with the it's a trope, right? The retired gunslinger, right? The person who has been like lethal and now they're not doing that anymore. And they tend to be really angsty and like heavy and self-destructive. Often they drink too much. They get in, you know what I mean? They hate themselves. They're down all the time. It's a very dark, typically a dark kind of character, very somber. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to do that. I want something similar, but not quite there. So I very deliberately was like, okay, he's got some PTSD, but he's not broken completely. He's trying to get by, and that was the character I wanted to write. And it's not nothing wrong with the other style of doing this
No, I
character.
mean, I wasn't trying to imply that you had
Yeah,
an issue with it, but I just thought that was interesting because, like,
yeah.
I thought that was pretty. It was good.
Thank you.
Because
Yeah, that
I'm
was
like, if it would have been like in this setting anyway, which is kind of meant to be, I don't want to say lighthearted, but like there's some fun to it, I guess.
it's not
And
grimdark,
what?
right? It's not grimdark. Like I was.
No, no. But like, it's still like serious enough where I'm like, okay, and I remember I was reading this, I'm like, oh wow, there's like some real character depth in here. I mean, not that I wasn't.
No, no, it's a people. Many people don't. Many people see like, oh, it's like an action story about a guy flying through space and punching spaceships, and they assume that the characters are going to be really one-dimensional and flat, or they hear that it's funny and they assume it's going to be a comedy,
Well,
right?
I mean,
And I get it. I get it. So I get a
I
lot of people who
tried
are
not
like,
to be
wow.
too presumptuous, is my point. But even then, I was surprised. I was like, wow,
Good.
this is pretty good. He's
Thank
really
you.
like these characters are really interesting.
I'm
I
glad
also
you
like
said
Ben
it.
a lot. He was a great.
Ben is one of my favorites that I don't think a lot of people don't talk about it. Ben, Ben is
He's
not
actually
exactly.
heartwarming. Their friendship's actually like nice because like, oh man.
Yeah, that's the other thing about me that's not grimdark. Like most of the people are nice. Like you run into someone, and for the most part, they're going to be friendly and helpful and nice, right? Most of the world, this world is not populated with people who are out to screw everyone else, like the way a real
Well,
grimdark
unless you're
tends
the
to be.
Ildrock, maybe.
The Ildra, they do terrible things, but they have what they think are good reasons for it that you find out as the books unfold.
Well, yeah, I don't want you spoiling
No,
anything.
I won't. But if you read the next couple books, well you'll see that it's explained. It's explained why they are as horrific as they are, and
Though,
they're broken too in a different way.
though, I mean, they're not just like, ooh, haha, we're gonna conquer everyone. Because they let the ship that he stays on kind of have her own territory or their territory. I don't know what their gender is.
All
She.
the ships all the ships you've met so far are female.
Oh, okay.
All the stations you've met so far are female. I mean,
Oh,
it's
it's
just
wistful.
arbitrary.
I'm a dumbass.
They don't have they don't have sex chromosomes. It's arbitrary. But in the language, they're all considered female. And I actually address why that is and what the exceptions are in later books.
Oh yeah, it's wistful. I got
Yeah,
him.
but it's always she. I mean, I was careful about that. I thought like because I'm the kind of person when I'm writing the book and I'm like, what pronoun should I use? And I would stop and really think about it for a while and not come up with like a rule and stuff. So yeah, all the ships are she.
Well, I wanted to be sure
Yeah,
before I
no, that's
said
fine.
anything.
It's all good. It's all
I
good.
didn't want anyone going like, you mispronouned them.
There is a ship that goes by different pronouns in the later book, and there are reasons. It's not entirely well. You'll see, or you know, people have seen. So I play with that a little bit. I don't play with that a lot. It's not a major. Pronouns are not a major theme of this series because
Well,
it's not a major. It's not a major theme
no.
of my life. So I'm not going to make it like a big deal. But
Well, no. It's, like I said, I wanted to be sure,
no,
but
that's good. Good.
they let Wistful have her like little territory, and if I remember, that's why Rohan went there because that's the
Yeah,
one
she's an
place.
independent, so they're not in charge of her system, and you don't really know why, except there was a peace treaty that it's referenced like briefly that there was a treaty. So you don't know exactly why they leave her alone, but they do. But
Well,
there
yeah,
you find out more later because there's always more later. That's the beauty. That's why I wanted to write a series. I want to be able to dribble in these little hints and these little questions. You're like, why do they leave her alone? And you can say, oh, you can find out in 3 books.
well, the point I was making originally is that they're not complete megalomaniacs. Like they do have some, or at least so far, it could be in the future. You're like, oh, that's like Viltrum. They're just megalomaniacs.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, but it's most people are pretty cool in this for the most part. Even Rohan, I wouldn't say Rohan's a. I mean, Rohan definitely has his like, oh, like when you first see Rohan, you're like, this guy's kind of goofy, and then you learn that like, oh no, he might be this like, which is kind of hilarious. It made me think. I mentioned this to you, Logan Nine Fingers from, um, from um
Joe Abercrombie,
Joe
First Law.
Abercrombie, yeah,
Yeah,
First Law.
I read those.
Whereas like, oh, he's this kind of goofy kind of guy, and then you like then the like the like why they're so feared comes out, and you're like, oh shit, that's oh no,
I don't know
oh
that I
no,
was
they're
thinking.
killing people.
I don't know that I was thinking of Logan, but I was. There's a lot. It's a very common thing in manga, like
Well,
Trigon.
I mean, I don't this isn't really like a grim dark with like real dark humor in it, but it's like that similar archetype of this guy's done some stuff, but like he's like, oh, but he's so like goofy and like not serious about anything, you
Until he
know.
is.
And then you're like, oh no, he's like murdering people now.
Yeah, that's there's a line in I think book 5, which isn't out yet, that I wrote that I was made me very happy. Where he's like, someone's telling him like, you joke around a lot, and he's like, yeah, get nervous when I stop joking, right? But that's a character right, type, right? There's a lot of characters like that in media, and I like that. Like I think it's cool. The guy is like joking and fun, but then it's like, oh, but now when they get serious, everybody better watch out because
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, like he's always nervous about he calls it the Ildrak rage.
Yeah,
So
well,
of course, having read these type of stories before, I was like, "Oh man, when's he gonna go off? Like he's gonna explode."
yeah, and I stole that from a lot of different places. I think I was thinking primarily of like Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z when I did that, but I'm sure there's plenty of other the Berserker Rage Wolverine, right? We've seen that as like a weakness of like the character in a lot of places, and I always liked it.
I didn't really think Vegeta, because like when I think of Vegeta, I think he's like this like arrogant, like oh yeah, nah, yeah, or oh man, what's one of his lines?
Yeah, but there are
He's not like
yeah,
the arrogant like I'm gonna beat
no,
your
no.
ass.
It's different in that way, but they did make storylines about Saiyans would lose their temper and go berserk.
Oh okay.
Right, and they made less of a deal about it as the series progressed. But that was a weakness of some of the forms in some of the earlier DBZ seasons.
Oh, I mean, I was thinking of Viltrum because Viltrum has the. I was thinking of Invincible a lot when I was reading this.
that too, similar to the Viltrum.
Because
I mean,
like they have that like they get real pissed off and they can't turn it off.
yeah, I mean, yeah, Invincible was absolutely the primary inspiration for this. One particular storyline made me do all the world building from Invincible was the key to everything.
Yeah, it was. I kind of I remember I told it like if I could pitch this to anyone, it would probably be like so. It's basically like if Mark decided to join Nolan with the Viltrums, and then he's like, you know what, I'm kind of bored with that. I want to do something else. And that's kind of where this story begins. Because I remember I watched another interview you did. I think it was the one you did with Raph. And you're like, hero's journey is fine. I want to see what they're doing after it's all over.
That is kind of what this is, right? The idea is that he had his hero's journey, and that was 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and he went through it. And this is the post. This is a different stage of like his character arc. It's not the hero's journey. It's not what you think of from there. Again, and that was deliberate. It was a little way to play with the tropes and do something a little different. But I don't think the hero's journey is as universal as people sometimes pretend it is.
Well, I mean, there is a call to action in this. Like, come on.
Oh, yeah. I think you need a call to action on almost any story. Yeah, you're gonna always have parts of it, right? If you don't have a call to action, then I don't know how you get a story.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think you like follow it exact. I don't. There's no like.
It's not point for point.
I was about to say there's no like mentor, but then I'm like, well, Ben and him start getting along with. It's more like a friendship, like drinking buddy type of. I don't really think like Ben's gonna be like, here, my son, take this shiny ball.
No, if he has a mentor, it's more Wei Li.
But
Wei Li is kind of his mentor a little bit.
Oh yeah, his friend. That's right. She's kind of. She kind of reminds me of the lady from Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Except she can fight.
Yeah.
And she doesn't like, and she's aware of some social graces.
Well, I made her that way because I figure she's an empath, so she actually knows when she's pushing her buttons too hard.
Mm.
Because she can tell, she can literally see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like what other people would have like learned social graces, she doesn't. So other people follow rules so they can act in a way that's appropriate for the majority of the situations they run into. And you learn the rules, right? You learn that this is the kind of behavior that will piss people off. She can actually tell if she's pissing you off or not, so she doesn't care about the rules,
Fair
right?
enough.
But she knows like, oh, I can tease this guy and I've teased him this much and he's not upset. Because if he were, I would see it, literally,
Well, I
right?
mean, I just thought of Mantis because, like, you know, she has the same. Except I didn't think she could, like. Maybe you were being figurative when you said she can see it, but I kind of imagined it's like a feeling.
I mean, it's not sight using eyes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. It's I worked out the whole magic system. It's it's she can sense it. No, you're right. It's not sight. It's she can sense other people's feelings. Most
Yeah,
people.
no, it's like I like how I was wondering when you were gonna do the Kamehameha, you know the.
I don't really have him doing as much long range stuff because I'm not a fan of it myself.
Oh, okay.
He does, he does some. He does some, but very little. Like it's he'll throw things at people or
But
like kick up sandstorms and stuff. But usually it's fisticuffs because that's
but
what I like. I like fisticuffs, so I put that in my book.
but yeah, like Rohan, you know, seems kind of like a goofy guy who doesn't like take anything seriously, and you know he can scrap, but it's not like you know he something else I was gonna mention, but you know, oh well. Yeah, but yeah, he's basically like a tow truck guy, just in space.
Yeah, he's got a blue collar job, probably a well paid blue collar job, but a blue collar job, right?
And
I would also like that idea too. I'm like, you always see these superheroes like looking for like work, and they're doing stuff that has not, and I'm like, Superman. Like, I get that he's got a secret identity, but like being a reporter is fine, but like he could make so much money as like a welder on skyscrapers or something. Like, think about how useful it would be to have a guy who can fly with laser beam eyes to on like constructing skyscrapers.
that
Like,
would be
just think
kind of
about
weird, though. You're like, oh,
yeah,
hey.
yeah. But they pay him millions to like lift girders up above like a city, put them in place, and weld them in place with his eyes. He could throw up huge skyscrapers in like no time. I'm like, why don't superheroes do stuff like that? You always see them having like their job is always something like that doesn't use their powers. I'm like, oh, use your powers, like do something useful.
I mean,
So
there are the hints that not all is what seems. I mean, well, aside from the obvious, hey, I used to be called the Griffin back in the day. You know, you can go look it up. Like he doesn't talk about his dad, doesn't talk about his mom very much. So I'm deducing that there is some friction there. You don't have to confirm or deny that, but
well, we know his dad is an Ildroch because that is literally we know he's a hybrid. All of the hybrids, their fathers are Ildroch and their mothers are anything else. So the Ildroch go around and they have this is not exactly what happens in Invincible, right? I mean, yes, what's his name came to Earth and had a kid, but that wasn't really his plan. It just happened, right? He came to just conquer Earth. But most of the Viltrumites weren't breeding with the natives and having kids until later in the comic.
mm-hmm.
So I switched that around. I'm like, that seems like the useful way to go. So in my setting, right, the Ildroch aren't that tough. They're maybe tough, but they're not like fly around and punch down, like destroy things with their hands, wipe out armies tough. They're just above average, but their kids have the powers. So they go to planets and they kind of just raise kids and then recruit them for their armies. And I always like that idea. I don't know. I got it from Invincible. It's not exactly the same. It's like a twist, and that's the trick. So yeah, his father's Ildroch, and you'll learn more in later books.
Well, yeah, I imagine so. But basically, this story starts. They get the bear people.
Yep.
They struggle with that a little bit. Then some scientists show up, and it just turns into a whole fiasco.
Yeah, because
we need a story to happen.
the story to happen. The wormhole opens. The Ursans come through, and then and everyone's then really wants to know what's on how did you open the wormhole? Like, Why did it open now and not before? What about the other? And that's the other beauty of it is, there's 5 wormholes in the system. Where do the other ones lead? Can we open those too? If we can figure out how the first one opened, can we open the others? So now we've got, we've got Ben and Marion, and then we've got this this lurking character is not there of Hyperion.
Yeah, and that was actually something I was going to ask you about, because like Hyperion is I guess he's sort of the Superman XB, if I could.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's kind of your intention.
Yeah. He was the strongest hybrid on Earth. He's the Superman.
Hopefully, you don't get sued by Marvel. They have a superhero called Hyperion, but they barely use that character.
Dan Simmons has a fantasy book called the name Hyperion's been used. It's from a poem from like 2,000 years ago. Marvel doesn't own it.
Fair enough, I guess.
Marvel doesn't own it. I couldn't call him Captain America, but I can call him Hyperion. Right?
Fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah. I that was another part I thought was kind of hilarious, is like Ben Stone's like, man, he wasn't perfect. He's like, and Roland's like, what do you mean? He's like, oh no, he wasn't like evil or nothing. He just like banging a bunch of people. He's like, oh God, okay, well that's, we all got our vices, I guess.
Yeah, it's like if Jimmy Olsen ended up with Lois Lane, but she had banged Superman Clark Kent a whole bunch when they were younger.
Yeah.
Like, I ended up with her, but, we all had our past. If Clark Kent was a little bit more of a slut.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I wasn't really sure of their age, though. Are they, like, middle-aged or, like...
The Stones?
Yeah.
No, they're older. They're, like 60.
Oh, wow.
I'd have to do the math to actually figure out. But they say in there somewhere that they've been away from Earth for decades.
Yeah, because I was thinking like maybe like 50s maybe. I don't know.
No, they're old. They're definitely old enough to be Rohan's parents or older.
Oh,
and he's in his 30s. He's I think in Wistful Ascending, he's around 32. I don't remember, but it's around 32. You can work it out from what's in the book, like more or less if you want. But he's around 32. They're definitely like significantly older. And Hyperion is it's been around for a while.
Wait, is it a spoiler to mention it? Is Hyperion dead, or is he just?
Yeah. No, they say it in the book. Hyperion's dead.
Oh, okay.
Hyperion's dead.
I remember they mentioned that Rohan might have had something to do with that, but
Rohan was there. Rohan was there.
I'll wait till we get to around the end.
They were on a mission together. I think in Wistful Ascending I say it explicitly, or let me put it this way: Rohan says it. Is he telling the truth? That's another story. But what he says in Wistful Ascending is that he was with Hyperion on a mission, and Hyperion was killed, and he is certain of this. So he absolutely says those things in the book.
Yeah, and Rohan's always kind of giving himself a hard time. He's like, I just tow trucks. But then you realize, he's actually pretty crafty. So they must have called him the Griffin for some reason.
I had at least one reviewer say he's not very smart, and I'm like, and I in a review of the book, and I was like, I don't think you read it that carefully, because he's pretty smart. He just keeps saying he's not smart, but he's not a reliable narrator. Like, you can't just take his word for stuff, right? You got to actually he does a lot of clever things,
Yeah, it reminds me of a line from I think it was Red Dead 2. It's like, it's good to keep it's good to let men keep thinking you're dumb, or something like that.
And he probably has some self-esteem issues. He doesn't feel great about himself, right? He has spent 10 years committing genocide on behalf of this evil empire, right? That's what he's been doing. He's not really thrilled about his own life, right? At this point, there's a reason he went to a space station and was like, I
kind of thought it was just like, you know what, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to chill out and have a normal.
But he's not
life.
He's not proud of the way he spent the last decade. He's wiped out, he's committed atrocities. He knows it. He may on some level think like he didn't have a lot of choice. It may have been the best thing to do at the time, but he has committed atrocities. So he's a little down on himself a lot. I'm like, that's fair. Like, he should be a little down on himself. Not too extreme. A little bit down on himself.
Now, how he was able to leave, we don't know that yet. But for some reason, he was allowed to leave.
Well, you find that at the end of the book.
Oh yeah, that's right. Or
You find
well,
out at the end
so
of
he
the book.
says.
Or you find out what he says is why he was allowed to leave. Which could be a lie, right? You don't know, but you know, but he definitely gives a story.
But he definitely pulls some power moves. Like he basically intimidates this it's like the sill,
The Shage?
the sage, yes.
Shage. The
Um
Shage, yeah.
which
My
and they're
poor
like
narrator had to
who
pronounce
try
all
to
the
like
words.
blackmail him into not dating his girlfriend. And he's like, "Really?" Like that was one of the moments I was like, "Okay, maybe he's going a little too hard in the genre savvy where he's like, "Oh, is this like the cliche where you like put the thing under?" And he's like,
I love that scene. I love that exchange. I really do. That's I love that when Rohan is in these tropey situations and he calls out the trope. It's almost fourth wall breaking, but it's not quite. Uh, but I like doing that. It's the kind of joke I like to tell, so I tell it.
no, but he manages to find a way around that. He's basically
Mhm.
like, "Hey, I got some like blackmail, and like if some Ildrock manages to accidentally stumble upon it, they're gonna wipe everyone out. So you better back off."
Yep. 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 Yeah. I mean, the whole notion is you've got a guy who's really good at face punching, but he doesn't want, and so he could solve all his problems by face punching because he's really good at it.
Well,
But
we
he
did see his
doesn't
plan
want to.
B. He did
Yeah,
eventually punch them in the face.
got a plan B, right? But he's trying really hard to solve his problems with with as little murdering as possible,
He's trying to be more
right?
diplomatic.
He's trying, or clever, or what. I mean, the way he survives in the end isn't really diplomatic, but it doesn't require him to do any face punching. Someone else does all the face punching for him, right? So it's all about trying this guy who sometimes punches faces, but is trying to solve problems in a better way.
Yeah,
You know,
he's
which is, like, okay, this has nothing to do with our lives, right? Like, we don't have a life where, like, I could murder everyone in the room, but instead I'll come up with a clever way to solve. Like, we don't. You and I don't have that life, right? Where those
mm-mm.
are. But the analogy is that you have this like very sort of overt, like obvious way to solve a problem. It's not always the best way. Sometimes we can try to spend energy thinking of more creative, better ways to solve our problems. That is more universal.
Yeah.
That was the intent. That was the intent.
I mean, I guess I kind of thought it was him trying to like that whole turning a new leaf thing he's trying to do.
Yeah, that too.
Because
That
he's
too.
like,
I
I've done a lot of things I'm not really proud of, and I want to do something else with my life.
and he's trying. It's not that. Of course, I'm not going to let him because that's boring. Poor guy. He's going to get dragged in, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I just, I mean, I know a story has to happen, but there were points I was like, man, can't he just have a day where he can just hang out and just get his freaking breakfast, do his
Readers of the
tow truck
series are always
business?
like, "Can this guy please just get a normal girlfriend?" And I'm like, "You can't, because once he's got like a really good, like sane, like girlfriend, then you don't have any romantic plots to throw into the next 17 books. So no, it's got to always be a mess. It's like
Yeah,
a sitcom.
dude's got messier relationships than Matt Murdock. Let me tell you.
Well, I don't know if I go that far.
Well, okay,
Matt
fine.
Murdock's got some messed up relationships, but they're
Um,
but they're a little messed up.
well, okay, they're not as dysfunctional, but they tend not to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fewer of his exes are going to die. Matt Murdock seems to always end up with his women die, and that's not going to happen with Rohan. I'm going to give. I like giving. I'm happy to hand out plot armor to anyone who's not like a combatant.
So,
You know,
and
like,
then there's also like a little stealth ship hiding inside the like main ship, I
yeah.
think, if that's
I deeply regret the name I gave that ship because that ship is in a lot of scenes throughout the series, and having a two-word name when you're constantly being talked about is very awkward. I absolutely screwed that up. But what are you gonna do? It's too late now. Void's Shadow. Yeah. I have a lot of fun with her, but I have more fun with her, I think, in later
But
books.
I like how perky she is. She's like, "Oh, hey, you're the guy," and he's like, "Oh, please."
Oh,
He
oh,
goes full
you
Kratos. He's
thinking of
like, "Please don't call
Insatiable?
me that."
Insatiable's really perky.
Insatiable's like, "Oh, you're the Griffin," and he just goes full
Yeah,
Kratos.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, "Please do not call me that." Oh my god.
A lot of people, yeah, people sometimes like, yeah, I like giving the AIs personality.
Also, that's one thing. I'm like, Rohan is really like cool with people who are, well, not cool. That's probably not a good word. But he tends to, like, let bygones be bygones a lot. And I'm like, I would at least be a little distrustful of Marion after she pulled that little stunt with the wormhole. I mean, she basically tried to out him in front of everybody. Like, I wouldn't just go like, it's cool, nothing personal.
You know,
Unless that was like a veiled threat or something. I don't
he,
know.
he he's meant to be like a little larger, like he's a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little better than life. He's a little more what we'd all like to be than is realistic, and that's also deliberate. You know, he's a little more self-effacing. He's a little more willing to sacrifice himself for others. He's a little more heroic than is probably. My goal wasn't primarily. I
There's
want to
people
write
who
a
are like,
character.
really? You're just gonna let it go? And he's like,
Yeah, my
but he
goal
was holding
wasn't.
on to it.
There's another side of that though, and part of it is he's really not that scared of much. Okay, so like I've done a lot of martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
I've known a lot of people who I'm not particularly tough, but I've known some very like tough people. Like
Mm-hmm.
people who are like in a fight, they're just gonna their choice is how badly do I hurt the other guy.
Oh,
That's
Jesus.
right. And what you find is like they're not really afraid. They go in a bar that's like some people getting rowdy. They have zero fear or concern. So they're very mellow. They're just very chill. They're just like, I'm not really worried because if you are going to be a jerk and throw a punch at me, I'm just going to have to hurt you a little bit. And I'll feel bad, but I'm not that bad. You know, like there's no fear. So he doesn't have as much. Ron really, in his heart, believes he's the toughest guy in the room. So he's not really afraid. Like, yeah, Marin can get him in trouble, but he'll figure a way out of it. So he can forgive and forget because he's not really that scared.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's. I mean, I would definitely be kind of like, or well, I mean, I'm not Rohan, but I would definitely be more like, hmm,
Yeah, yeah.
not. I don't know if it's like fear. That's why it's just more like, it's more like, you know, I don't trust you. You're kind of just doing your own thing, keeping an eye
I
on
mean,
you.
if I were in his shoes, I'm not saying I would behave like him either, right? Like he's not me. Right? People are like, how much of Rohan is like you? And I'm like, that's not how my brain works. Like, I don't think about this guy as like, oh, what would I do in that situation? And then I write the character. That's not it, right? He's like an idealized version of what I think I maybe not me, but what a person should want to be like in a way. And
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, he's a little nicer than he probably should be.
Though
But
I
he'd rather do that than be like, like he doesn't have a lot of friends, a lot of people in his life, so he'd rather give them a lot of rope to hang themselves with, and that's the mistake he's gonna make, right?
like for
Giving people too much leeway, be too trust. He'd rather be the guy who's too trusting than the guy who's not trusting enough,
all right
right?
then.
That's the call.
I also kind of suspect because of the ending, but I don't want to really go into that just yet. Then one of the reasons he might be like that, but I won't go into that. Some more Ursins show up, but they're not so lucky this time. And then I'll just put it this way: he goes full Veltrum rage and just murders all the other um Ursins, pretty much.
Yeah, I had
And
a
I'm
lot
like,
of
damn.
people talk about that. That's the scene people mention the most. You know, people tell me I'm in chapter 31. I can't believe it. And I'm like, okay. You know, people tweet at me or whatever. Yeah, well, you know the story. You got to see him lose it. You got to know what's at risk.
Mm,
When he's in a fight, the risk is not as much that he's going to lose. The risk is that he's going to lose control, and everyone else will lose, right? Like, and
Yeah,
that's a different dynamic because I'm writing a story about the toughest guy in the room. It's hard to tell a story about the toughest guy in the room because he's the toughest guy in the room, right? Like, it's hard to feel tense. How do you feel stressed out about him? He can kick everyone's ass. So I want to very deliberately. You have to give him other thing. You know, he doesn't want to be the guy who killed everyone, but you got to know that that's a serious possibility. So he's got to do it at some point, you know. So yeah, that was the way that, and people react really differently to that scene. I get a lot of reviewers who are very upset that he wasn't punished more for what happened there. Because he committed war crimes, everyone was like, "Yeah, we don't care."
I mean, to be fair, he did tell them to back off.
He did, and then they surrendered, and he kept killing them, right? And like a lot of people, like that's not cool, and I'm like, it's not supposed to be cool. Whaley just doesn't care, and Wistful doesn't care, but they're not really. Neither of them are really human, and neither of them are beholden to human morality, right? So to them, it's a little different. But people think he should have been harder on himself after that. And I'm not going to argue. That might be something we've got to come back and see more about later.
I kind of gathered he's that guy who just kind of keeps moving. Because he seems like if he kept thinking about it, it would just drive him crazy.
He's committed a lot of atrocities.
But again, I'm trying to save my speculation towards the end.
No, it's good. It's good. No, it's a perfectly valid way to look at it.
Because I'll admit, Joe, when you mentioned the unreliable narrator bit, I didn't really think of that until we were, I don't know. I guess I was just really caught up in the action or something. I don't know. But again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself.
He lies to people. We see it. He's very willing to lie if he thinks there's a good reason for it. He's not like one of these I'll never tell a lie guys. He'll stone cold lie to people if he thinks it serves a purpose.
Also, some other Ildrock children, well, the hybrids show up and beat his ass, and he's like, okay, so were they the spies? Because they mentioned like there may be a spy in there. So was that them, or was that just the ship? Because they mentioned like there was like a little ship inside Insatiable.
Void Shadow was inside Insatiable. There was the one hybrid was on that ship, spying on Marion Stone. Mm-hmm. He fights Rohan. Rohan like breaks his legs and arms, puts him on the ship, and like sends him off into space. And then that guy tells the other three.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay,
so we don't see them have that conversation. That happens off screen because the whole book is one point of view. Right? The whole book is through Rohan's eyes. So you don't see that, but they tell him, yeah, that guy showed up and he told us, and now we're here to kill you. So what's that guy's name? I can't remember that guy's name.
Jerome?
Sure. I should know this. I wrote the book.
Or something? It was like Jerome, if I remember right. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. And then he sends Rex, Clear Eyes, and the Dwarf to get revenge.
Who are old friends of Rohan, apparently.
Yeah, especially the Dwarf. Actually, they were like a team. I had a couple ideas for like short stories or novellas about like missions they were on back in the day, but I don't know if I'll ever write that. I don't know if it's worth it, but maybe one day I'll write a story like that.
Sorry.
No more stories about that because after the end of the book, they're not teaming up again.
I'll be right back real quick, but I want to ask you this before I need to go to the bathroom real quick. Okay. What was your favorite moment to write for anyone who might be curious in this book?
Probably Rohan losing his temper. It's very satisfying. It's an all in the family moment, man. I used to watch that show. It was the first toilet flush on broadcast television.
But you liked Rohan losing his temper, you were saying.
It's probably, so, you can say what he did was right or wrong. Most people think it's wrong, and I'm not going to argue, but it was also deeply satisfying.
I think he went too far. I don't know.
I'm not going to argue, but it's the whole punching Nazis thing, right? Like, maybe it's wrong to go punch a Nazi. I'm not saying if I saw a Nazi marching down my street, I would go and punch them or shoot
I
them.
mean, you have every right. I mean, you're Jewish, you know.
I am, but like we also live in a society where you don't just go punching people for just being a dick, right? That's not how we live our lives, right?
Yeah, we're supposed to be civilized.
For civilized, and for the most part, I am. And honestly, if I saw a Nazi marching down the street, I would really want to go hit them, and I probably wouldn't. And to be honest, I probably would not do that. But like, you
You'd be
have to
very
imagine.
tempted to.
But that's the thing. You have to imagine that going and doing it would be so deeply satisfying,
Yeah.
right? And so that those scenes where Rohan wreaks havoc and justice on his enemies are deeply satisfying to me. This is living vicariously, right? So those are probably my favorite scenes. The other favorite scenes are always the jokes that work really well, like a joke, because I don't plan the jokes.
In that scene in particular, I think it's one of those like murky things where it's just like, he told him to not do it, It doesn't justify what I don't know if right and wrong are the right words here.
Well, no, you can have both. You can say, man, that behavior, it feels good, but it's probably wrong. That's what I was trying to convey.
Mm-hmm.
I did the wrong thing, but it had to have felt good, right? And that's okay. That's humanity, right? Sometimes we want to do things that are the wrong thing to do. That doesn't excuse it that it would feel good to do the thing, right? But
that's why it's so tempting after all.
Yeah, but if someone hurt someone you care about and you had a chance to go murder them, you would feel. I'm not saying you would do it, and I'm not saying you should do it, but you have to know you'd have the urge, and if you had the chance, it would feel satisfying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we have to acknowledge. But I'm writing fiction, so I can put this in there, and no one actually gets hurt, and I can write this like cathartic, experience into a book.
Well,
Kinda.
yeah, I mean, the evil bear people were not being very nice. So, I mean, there was certainly some force that was needed. But yeah, when they started surrendering, that's when I'm like, I probably shouldn't have killed them.
Yeah. It was
but
very
I think you're
deliberate.
so lost in I call it the Bloody Nine because it's basically, or the Viltrum Rage.
It was not meant to be a good moment for him. It was meant to be a moment where he loses.
So are you gonna have like a Ildrock like hand spear like an Invincible? Are you gonna do that in future books?
He uses a bunch of techniques. I don't think he does it in this book. He tends to take his own blood and form it into a spear after he's gotten his ass kicked. I use that a few times, and then I use a lot of flying stuff, a lot of techniques that are not real to real martial arts, but leverage the fact that he can fly. So a lot of dive bombing on people.
Yeah.
But you have to sort of think a lot about well, how would people fight if they could fly? Like it'd be different, right? It wouldn't follow the same rules as like a boxing match.
But yeah, and then basically does the old war tactic of sending the dead like, all right, don't come back here. You're gonna get messed up. But I did feel bad for the other bear people who didn't make it. I was like, oh man, darn.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some some people talk about this book as if it's a cozy, and I'm like, I don't know that I would agree. There's some darkish things happen. It's not a grimdark book, right? But there's some nasty things happen, and I had to put some nasty things in there to tell the story I wanted to tell.
It's a measured book, I thought. It's kind of again like Invincible. Like there's the dark dark stuff, and then there's like the fun stuff,
so plot wise I took a lot from Invincible, but I also felt like I was trying to take tone wise a lot from Invincible too, right? It's not the same tone, but I think it's more close than it is far,
or again, Star Trek, or Deep Space Nine was particularly good at that. I mean, I like the other shows, but Deep Space Nine is my favorite one. So
yeah, it was the best show. I mean, I haven't seen the newest stuff, but Deep Space Nine was the best of the older stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, I still need to. I know you said you mentioned Babylon 5. I haven't seen Babylon 5, so.
So Babylon 5 was phenomenal for its time. I don't know if you would not have the same experience that I had of it watching it when it first came out, because TV has changed.
Well, yeah.
It's not, wouldn't feel as groundbreaking to you as it did to me when it came
I
out.
mean, I enjoy Deep Space Nine. It can't be that bad.
No, no, no. In many ways, it's better, but the first few episodes are worse.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
problem with B5. The first few episodes are not great, and it takes a long time for you. Once you get to the end of the first season, you start to see that they're really doing something interesting, but it doesn't appear that way at first.
I did hear some of the actors didn't get along, and then it turned out one of them had paranoid schizophrenia.
Yeah, the guy who played the captain, I don't know all the details, but he definitely had some significant mental health issues. So they had to, and don't forget the show had a 5 year arc that was written before the show started.
Mm-hmm.
A storyline. So it wasn't planned, but they had to be flexible. Like this guy couldn't keep his job. He couldn't stay working. He needed like more help than he could get, like while doing the show. So they replaced him with Bruce Boxleitner, who did a great job, but they had to change the
The guy
characters.
from Tron?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. He was the captain for the last 4 seasons of B5.
Oh, okay.
And he did a great job, but they didn't recast the character. They had Bruce play a new guy.
Oh, okay.
So they had to change the storyline. It was an amazing show, but again, I don't know if it would be as it's like Jeffrey War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
It's fine, but it's
Feels like
amazing.
it feels like a journalist report, to be honest with you.
But like you had to think it's so groundbreaking and original,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we've seen all that before. So if you and I read it, I read it like not that long ago, but like it did none of it was fresh and original to me, right? Because I've seen all those themes done 100 times, but it had to, so B5 you may not love it as much as I did because you've seen some of this stuff done elsewhere, but the overall show was great. I took I took some inspiration from there definitely.
I was gonna ask, where'd you take some of the inspiration, or is that spoilery for Babylon 5?
No, it's probably more like the feel of this very cosmopolitan, very large station that has like its own like sort of civilian population. Because the thing about B5 is B5 was a setting where it wasn't just like the main characters on a ship on a ship. It was the main characters on a ship that also had like another million or whatever, hundreds of thousands of people living there, all going about their own business,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that sense that you have these main characters, it was almost like a city in space. And so
Okay.
B5 was really a part of the show. Very much felt like these characters were moving around in this very busy ship where everyone else was doing their own thing. That's what I took from it. Probably
Oh, okay.
more than any plot lines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, I hate Hollywood pitches, but, I would probably say, like, Invincible and Star Trek, because, I'm more familiar with Star Trek.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard that. I heard Dragon Ball Z meets Babylon 5. I've heard Harry Dresden in Space. I've heard a lot of pitches, none of which seem Guardians of the Galaxy. People call it similar to that, which
Not the
was my
Motley Crew, though. Like, not the Motley Crew, though.
yeah. So
A
yeah,
Will
I mean,
Dory will appear if we mention a Motley Crew.
yeah. That's right. That's right. She does
Um,
love it through. So and all those things influenced it. I mean, those are all media that I love. Like those are all things that I was deeply vested in.
so did you read like the Jim what is it called, the Thanos arc that Jim Starlin did, inspired Infinity War? Do you like that stuff?
I was a huge Jim Starlin fan of the stuff he did in like the 70s. I mean, that the early Thanos stuff, like the Warlock stuff, I wasn't even old enough to really read that when it came out.
Now,
But
I
I read
will admit that stuff, we were saying earlier about it might not hit me as much as it affects you. It's like that because I thought that arc was kind of cheesy. But I think I am like, imagine how like that must have blown like a bunch of people's minds back in the day. It must.
The Warlock storyline where he's fighting the Magus.
No, I've only
The
read Infinity Gauntlet. Is what I'm talking about.
Warlock and the Magus, that storyline is fantastic because Warlock is fighting the Magus, who's the leader of this like evil church that's like just like running like oppressing the galaxy, and the Magus is him from the future, and he
Oh,
knows
wow.
it. He knows it the whole time. He knows he's going to turn into this guy that he's fighting with every fiber of his being, and the other guy knows that he's old him because there's some time travel shenanigans, and that's the setting for
That's a
their
weird.
content.
That's a weird. You know.
It's cool, right? And he's
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
like go through this, and he's always like, how do I turn into that guy who's such an asshole? And he's trying to figure that out as he tries to stop all the Magus' shenanigans. That's where Gamora came from. She was a side character in that. Pip, the troll who you see Pip the troll in the Thanos saga, I believe. Anyway,
It's
I
been a
love
long
that.
time since I've read Infinity Gauntlet, so
But
I
I read a lot of the cosmic stuff that Jim Starlin did for Marvel, and I read like all of Dreadstar. I was a huge fan of Dreadstar, which was the Jim Starlin thing he did on his own, not through Marvel. Like it started as a Marvel publication, but then it split off. But it wasn't in the Marvel universe. And yeah, I was hugely influenced by that stuff. Well, I'm influenced by a lot. I mean, I'm old. I'm
yeah. I mean,
influenced by a lot.
I'm more in like I guess I like more like street level heroes. I mean, I'm not really as familiar with the cosmic stuff.
To be fair, I was more into the street level heroes than the cosmic stuff.
Or if it was space with something like Guardians of the Galaxy or like Cowboy Bebop, where it's like these group of you know near do
Yeah,
wells kind of get up in the wacky shenanigans.
I like the Starjammer stuff in X Men quite a bit. The storylines, the way they were off with the Shi'ar and the Starjammers. Um, I thought that was really cool in the X Men storylines. I read a lot of stuff, right? But I was less interested in like Captain America, the Avengers. I cared about the Fantastic Four. I cared a lot less.
Oh,
I guess I
Fantastic
like the
Four was some of
extreme.
the first stuff I read when I was a kid.
I read it. I mean, I still am waiting for the Fantastic Four movie where they bring Mole Man back because that's what we need. That was the first villain in Fantastic Four #1, and that's the guy who's going to save the Marvel universe. We need Mole Man to come back, but uh, but they don't listen to me. I could write that, man. I'm telling you, it could be a whole new Avengers thing where they're just trying to stop Mole Man coming up from with all the giant monsters from beneath the earth.
That's I remember one of the first comics I read. I had this little toy set of that original Jack Kirby cover where it's they're fighting that like I don't know what the hell that creature's supposed to be. It's like a mud creature or something.
A lava creature, a lava guy from under the earth, Mole
Yeah.
Man. I'm not kidding, man. It was
And like
Mole
Mole
Man,
Man was sitting like that was some of the first comics I read growing up.
and he's like this like old dude, like kind of short and bald with like the weird glasses because he's a mole.
The
Can't quite see
Underminer in
it.
Incredibles had to have been a reference to Mole Man. It
Oh
had to
yeah,
have been.
oh yeah, oh everything in there was. They probably took from Fantastic Four more than anywhere else. I mean, it was pretty clear, you know.
Anyway,
We're in high.
but
We're
yeah, but I like how this was kind of like there was some slice of life elements where you could connect with it, you know. So it wasn't just like oh wacky space adventures, you know.
I do not know why I put so much food in these books, but I just do.
I mean, I was
People
fine with it. I mean, it wasn't George R. R. Martin, you know, but it was, you know,
people complain sometimes. Some people love it and some people hate it. Like I really
it
get,
did make me hungry though. I was like, man,
I get that a lot.
I
I
want
get
to
that a
eat
lot.
some food.
Definitely get people saying this too much just eating over a meal, and I'm like, I mean, they have to have conversations, and it's
Are
just
you are you part Italian or? 'Cause I've heard
no.
Italians really like their food.
I like food. I'm not Italian. My wife's a foodie, and I'm kind of a foodie. So
Oh, okay, there you go.
we eat out a lot. It's kind of my hobby. Yeah, you know, it's just easier to have a conversation over food. To writing a conversation with people just talking in a room is tricky because there's nothing going on, right? So you just have like dialogue. They just alternate, and it doesn't read well. It doesn't look good on the page. So I just have them eating, so there's something to do to break up the lines of dialogue. So it was just a trick for that, and then I just stuck with it. So you just
The
always eat.
well, I mean, there is one trope I like in the like kind of superhero. It's also in man. I don't know if you play video games very much, but
Not much.
there's a game called Mass Effect that this
I
kind of
know of
reminded
it.
me of.
Mhm.
Um, well, especially towards the end as we get to the kind of it's kind of part of a trope I'm kind of a sucker for, but again, we'll get to that. Um, oh, what else is there? Oh yeah, Rohan gets a girlfriend.
Huh?
Doesn't last though. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but you know.
It can't.
I know. I was like, dang it.
What are you doing in book two? What are you
Ron's
doing in
doing
book
the
two?
right thing. It's one of those
But
moments where doing the right thing just feels bad when you're
but
like,
the girlfriend and the meals are like they're the goal, right? They're what Rohan wants. He wants like like don't forget, like, yeah, her dad's rich or whatever, and he gets some shenanigans with that, but like she's basically a normal person.
mm-hmm.
She's not superpowers. She's not trying to conquer the world. She's not trying to save the world. She has her own.
She's not some super assassin ex-girlfriend that for some reason you got with when you were in college.
And she's not, right? You're not going to find out, like in book three, that she's actually a superpowered assassin who's like been there to like trick him to do something. Like she really is what she seems to be. But she and those meals with the stones, where they're just sitting around like eating donuts and like
I like
chatting.
those bits. Why do people hate those? They just
I don't know, but they are what they are everything he wants. They are why he's there, right? And so is he going to keep it all? Probably not, right? He's going to lose it, get it back. But to me, I needed to show what his goals were, and his goals are not to become king or conquer the world or even save the world. His goals are, I want to have like be able to sit around and eat donuts with my friends. So I
also
put it in the book.
I forget if this is mentioned in the book. Um, was Rohan a superhero or was he just one of the like soldiers for the
No, on Earth he was a cape.
Oh, he was.
Not literally a cape. I don't. I just wrote his costume. I described his costume in detail from when he was on Earth. I don't think there's a cape, but he was a costumed superhero fighting crime on Earth for a few years in his late teens. You find out more about that in the second book, in Return of the Griffin. A little more, not a lot. He did that for a few years, and then
So was the Griffin his superhero name, and then it just kind
yes,
of became
and it was
his?
all. So the Griffin was his superhero name when he was fighting crime in New York, like as part of a team.
Uh huh.
Well, Vanguard, right? Which isn't important. But I mean, he was literally like, oh, they're robbing the bank, call Vanguard. And they fly over and beat up the bad guys, right? It's a very typical comic book.
Superhero shenanigans. I
Yes,
hear you.
exactly. I mean, you don't find out. I'm never going to write like a book of like them fighting bank robbers, right? That's never going to happen. But it's, I'll tell you, like, there's enough in there that you can infer that they spent a lot of time doing that.
Okay,
For a few
I
years.
wasn't entirely sure. I think I
Yeah.
remembered him mentioning it, but
Very little of it's in Wistful Ascending. Return of the Griffin, he goes back to Earth, and you get much more of it. Much more solid impression of what that was like. But and then the Hyperion gathered all the hybrids on Earth, which is not all the superpowered beings, but all the hybrids, and basically told the Empire as a trade, we're going to go and we're going to fight for you, but you promise to leave Earth alone for the indefinite future. Don't mess with them. Don't make trade. Don't. And also, you're going to give them some advanced technology. So as part of that trade, Rohan and Hyperion left. And he
oh,
went with
okay.
the other hybrids who aren't named in Wistful Ascending, but they are named in later books. You find out a little more about them.
So
And they
was
went
the
off and
dwarf
fought.
a
And then
superhero? Or
hmm?
was the dwarf a superhero? Or was he from another culture?
Different planet.
Oh,
He's not
different
half
planet.
human.
Okay.
He's not half human. None of those guys are half human. You haven't met any of the other half human hybrids.
Oh, okay.
Right, Hyperion is half human. You haven't met him. He's dead. Rohan's half human. You haven't met any of the other ones. Some of them are named in later books.
Also, I was kind of confused about the stones being hybrids, but you're like, no, they're human.
No,
So
no, they're the sidekicks. Literally, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane. Right? They knew Hyperion when they were kids. They were like his Scooby Gang. I don't know if you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but like like the backup, like. They'd be on the computer. We'll find out where the bad guy's hideout is, and you'll fly in and smash it up. Right?
I was thinking more like Micro from the Punisher, though I don't know how big on the Punisher you are. But
I have not read much of the comic, but I read the show. I watched the show. I assume it's
okay,
very similar.
because
I
like
read a little bit of Punisher comics. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not a gun guy. I
fair
don't
enough.
generally like characters with guns.
There
But
are a lot of guns in There's a lot of guns in the Punisher.
a lot of guns in the Punisher, yeah, which is fun. I'm not against guns like morally. I'm just not.
You're more like a red stick
Listen,
and fists and stuff.
yes. I'm a close combat guy. That's
A guy
just
with a shiny
look.
fist. Are we gonna get
Yeah,
an Iron
yeah.
Fist XP
Oh, I
in the
love
series?
Iron Fist. I loved Iron Fist. but like it's just what you think is cool, right? It's like it's not like a value judgment. I'm not saying like guns are
No, no,
bad.
no, no. I hear you. I hear what you
Yeah,
mean. You
yeah.
just don't prefer the heroes with the guns. I got you.
I prefer the
Not
fisticuffs.
not a Nick Fury fan, I guess.
Nick Fury, yeah, not was it, Nick Fury was never like my favorite guy, right? My favorites are always like the Moon Knights and the Iron Fist and Shang-Chi. I was a huge Master of Kung Fu fan, huge, which isn't really a huge influence on this book,
Are
but
we going to get like a Iron Fist XP with like the fist and all that, or no?
spoiler.
Oh, it's a spoiler. Okay.
You will get more martial arty stuff happening later. That happens starting in book 4, because I don't know if it's in this book, but he definitely has a friend on Earth who trained him in martial arts,
Oh
who's
yeah, I
like
think I
an
remember him mentioning that. Yeah.
Spiral. I don't know if he's mentioned in this book or if he's in
Oh
book
yeah,
2.
I think I remember him mentioning that. Yeah.
I think he just tells Wei Li, I had this guy Spiral who you would like.
Oh, that's
Something like
right.
that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't appear. So Spiral and Amber were actually characters from a book I plotted, and I wrote like the first chapter. I never finished it. But then I just hijacked them for this series. So Spiral is like a martial arts master, right? And that's going to have effects on later books because it will. Yeah. So you'll see more
So,
stuff about that.
what else have I not mentioned?
There's a lot of little stuff in this book. I like to pack things in.
Oh yeah, Marion. Again, Rohan kind of lets things go. You know, just like okay, like even that alien who jumped him in the Iron Man gear. He's like, really? You're gonna let it go? No big deal. And he's like, eh.
It's a shonen manga thing, right? There's this there's a very common trope
I'm surprised Marion wasn't like punished further. Like her punishment was just kind of like, okay, you're gonna show us how this thing works. Which I'm like, all
there's a
right, whatever.
very common thing in shonen manga where the hero faces a villain, the villain is nasty, defeats the villain, they end up becoming friends, and then villain ends up being his ally against the bigger villain in the next arc. Right? So it all rests on the hero.
So Dragon Ball basically, like because
Yeah,
because
but that's
Vegeta and
an example
Piccolo,
of it.
because like
But that's
Vegeta and Piccolo don't like
Piccolo. It's Piccolo, right? But think about it. Goku wasn't so lazy. Wasn't so like, oh, Piccolo, you tried to kill all my friends like last week, but now we're good. Now we're good. It's fine. If Goku wasn't such a knucklehead about stuff like that, the stories wouldn't work, right? Goku's always like, oh yeah, you were terrible, but we'll be friends now. It's fine, right? And he's
yeah,
always like,
like
Goku's an idiot.
gives like Goku and like Goku will fight like Piccolo and Vegeta, and then he's like, oh yeah, Frieza, he's real bad.
Yeah.
We need to
No,
stop
but
him.
he allies with Frieza in later stories, right? Like it's always like, oh, you were my enemy, but now you're not, so it's fine. So that's like a very common thing in manga, and I always like that. So Rohan is, and also like I said, I think was he too forgiving? Maybe, but like I could think he kind of feels like Marion is like she slipped up, she was super pissed, and Marion's traumatized, right? She says
Yeah, there
it.
was this. Oh yeah, that's actually a thing I forgot to mention. There was this big like hybrid rebellion, I guess,
There's a
because
big hybrid rebellion. The hybrids
turns
tried
out
to
the
get
hybrids don't
freedom.
like being used by the Ildrak elite
I
people.
mean, it sucks. They all live short, brutal lives. They die in the service of this empire. They don't really have a choice in the matter. They all hate it, and they tried to win their freedom, and Rohan stopped them. That's how he got free, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like they're pissed at him, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, they probably deserve it." And he probably understands on some level. Marion was traumatized during this rebellion. He doesn't know the details. See, here's the thing: he doesn't know the details, but he knows the kinds of things that hybrids do in war. Nasty, terrible things, because he's done them himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't know what happened to her, but he can imagine it's got to be bad. So he knows she's traumatized by it, so he's going to forgive her. Maybe he shouldn't, but he does. So there's a lot of everything in this book is
Well,
about
put it
trauma.
this way: maybe Rohan is. I don't know if I should throw this out just yet because he gets pretty savage. But he's a better man than me in some ways. Because I would be like, this lady needs to be on lockdown at least.
But that's was my goal, was to write a guy who wasn't flawless, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like perfect, but I want readers to look at this guy and say he's a better man than me. Like that is literally what I was trying to do. Like that was literally my better man than me, right? Like I'm not excluding myself from this, but it's
That's what
tricky,
I was
right?
thinking. I'm like, yeah, he's better than I would be in that situation.
Because the trivial way to write a character who people look at and go, "You're better than me," is to make them like flawless and perfect. So you have to not do that because that's boring.
Well,
Right? Just
yeah.
a guy who's just perfect, right? So you got to make them somewhat conflicted. You have to, but at the end of the day, I wanted a guy who you not you, but all of us
People,
or
yeah,
many
I
of
hear
us
you.
would look at and say, "This dude is better," because it's a superhero story. That to me, that was the goal.
You wanted to tell I don't want to say standard, but you wanted to tell a classic superhero story. I hear you.
It's a classic superhero story. The guy I want the guy to seem better than, but not perfect because perfect's a little boring, right? So I didn't make him perfect. I gave him some flaws, and most people do not. I get a lot of feedback because I read a lot of reviews. People talk to me all the time about these books.
Like
Very
we're
few
talking
people are
right
like
now.
Rohan. Yeah, but I mean, I've done this a lot, right? People are not usually telling me Rohan's too perfect. I don't get that, so I feel like I did my job. I got a guy who people kind of think, "Oh, this guy's better than us," but not so perfect that it's boring. That's that's the needle I'm
I would
threading.
say like too forgiving maybe, but again, there's some stuff I wanted to talk about when we get to the ending that I didn't that I was thinking about because we talked about it a little bit and I'm like I don't know if I said it, but I definitely was thinking it like we should save this for this conversation.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, so there was a hybrid civil war, I guess.
Rebellion, Civil War. I don't know. They called it the rebellion. I don't know what they were just trying to get free.
And that ended, and we end up learning that Rohan had a big part in ending it.
Yep. Because he
Um,
is at the end of the day the toughest guy in the room.
um, but like, even though he is this kind of would goofball be the right word? I would say goofy, but he's not like Goku, who's just like bouncing around and being like, "Oh, well, look at that," you know.
He's laid back.
He's laid back. That's a good
He's
term for it.
chill.
You know, he's laid
Laid
back, doesn't take too much seriously, but you do kind of learn that like there is more than meets the eye. Like he predicts that there's a spy on the ship. So, you know, he ended up being right about that. He ends up getting the people to back off. The guy who was trying to blackmail him well, it wasn't really blackmail, I guess. I kind of thought of it as it's not really blackmail because he's not like saying like, "Oh, you're the guy who tried to pay him off," basically.
I know who you're talking about. Is it blackmail or extortion? He he got them to do what he wanted by threatening them. It's either black. There's a difference between blackmail and extortion. I know there's a difference. I do not remember which is which.
It's
So I
somewhere in
don't.
that range.
It's somewhere in that range. So no, he
And then basically was like, "Oh, I was in one of your little laboratories. I found you were
Zahad.
experimenting on hybrids, and you don't want the Ildrox figuring that out."
Zahad. The name Zahad comes from Babylon 5 because there's this very important place, and there's just nothing to, like the storylines aren't connected anyway. But there's a very important place in Babylon 5 called Zahadun. So I took Zahad is based on that's just the name. Like that's the only connection. But I did steal that from B5. So Zahad was this one of the things he's done in the 10 years he's working for the military was he wiped out an entire like solar system full of people. And Zahad, they were doing bad things. So and he's just threatens the shade. She's like, if you piss me off enough, I'll accidentally like leak some information that'll get all of you guys killed. So leave me alone.
Yeah,
you know,
pretty much. So basically, there's more to him than meets the eye. And then
yeah.
that's finally where we kind of do the classic in media race where he gets jumped by a couple of hybrid people. One of them is this guy Carl, isn't it?
Rex,
Rex. God, I'm an idiot.
Rex, Clear Eyes, and the dwarf.
Yeah, they jump him, and they're basically like, "Hey, you beat up our friend, so we're gonna kill you now." And he's like,
No, you beat it. No, it's you led the rebellion. You ended the rebellion. We're going to kill you now.
"Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah."
Like, we beat up our friend, but before that, our friend heard Marion over the airwaves say that you ended the rebellion. That's not cool. We're going to kill you for that. Because hybrids are violent. Like my whole idea is like they kind of like, oh, you beat up someone. Well, if they lost, they were weak and deserved it, right? It's like
Again,
the
Viltrum
Klingons, right? Like that kind of warrior culture. That
or Viltrum.
yeah, exactly, right. It's their behavior is very much like that, right? For reasons, but then it can't forgive them for any of the rebellion.
So
So
I guess I'll stop tiptoeing around it. So the ending is where things get really spicy. Not sexually, but like just, things go down. So he gets jumped by Clear Eyes Rex and the dwarf, gets beaten nearly to death, and they're
it's
about to
also the
kill him.
beginning of the book.
What? That's also at the beginning of the book too, in medias res. He gets beaten up, and then he's all like, "You fools! You don't." Um, and basically was like, "So why'd you end the rebellion?" And he basically just says like, "There's this well, there was this weapon that I used that basically, and it also plays with this trope I really like, and not just superhero stuff, but like in Mass Effect they do this as well. I like the trope of we're trying to fend off. Game of Thrones does this too. We're trying to fend off this greater threat, so we're gonna have to. I know we don't like each other, but we're gonna have to work together if we're gonna beat that thing or person or whatever it might be.
There's more of that coming.
Oh man, this is gonna be great then. I like that trope a lot. So he basically invokes that trope on the three of them. Basically, like, look, there's things that we will not be able to. Basically, pulls the whole. There's some things you cannot comprehend, and I stopped it to make sure that doesn't
Evil
happen.
grandmas.
What?
It's evil grandmas.
Yeah, evil grandma. Yeah, pretty much. He's like, yeah. Do you ever wonder what happened to the female population? And they're like, I don't know.
Evil
Like,
grandmas. If the evil grandmas were let loose, we'd all be dead, and so would all of our friends, and all these planets would have been wiped out. I saved all that.
so basically, they're like, so basically, it's like they're trying to prevent like a nuke from going off or something like that.
Well, that's the thing. If he doesn't stop the rebellion, they have a nuke they could have used, and that would have stopped the rebellion. But there would have been a lot more, not literally a nuke, like figuratively.
Yeah.
But that would have been a lot more collateral damage. And they're like, how about you work for us, dude? And this is how the Ildrak work. This is how they get him to commit genocide. This is how they get him to commit atrocities. This is how they manipulate the hybrids. They always say, like, oh, you don't have to do this, but if you don't, we'll take care of it, and we'll take care of it in a way that causes a lot more damage. So he ends up doing these horrible things in order to, because they seem like the right thing to do at the time. But then after 10 years of that, he's like, I've had enough. I just can't handle it anymore. But
So he pulls that and then brings them to the planet, I think, that Wistful hovers
Three.
above. Toth
Yeah.
3.
Yeah. It's
And
just a Earth-like planet.
they all get brutally murdered while he
Yeah.
just sits there and just hangs out. And
Because
you're
he
like,
figured-
well,
he-
shit, that got dark.
He figured out what triggers the kaiju.
It's like, yeah, I was reading that. I'm like, shit, man, that got really dark. Like, look, there was the scene where he was basically committing war crimes against the bear people, but like that, I was like, damn, like that's cold blooded. Like that,
And
like
he didn't do it until they threatened to not just kill him, but kill people on Wistful.
like at least with the bear people, like he had just lost control. Like it wasn't just like the end part. You're like, damn, like that was like cold blooded, you know.
He's he's not he's an easygoing guy until he's not.
And that kind of brings up my theory, what I thought of later, why I think maybe he is so easygoing, because he's afraid of what he could do.
Oh yeah. 100%.
If he decided to like hold on to it and be like, you know what, fuck these people, I'm gonna kill them. Like he's afraid of what he could do, you know.
And again, it's hard to write a character who's ultra competent because on some level, it's a little bit like it can be boring, right? Just like any kind of perfect character, it can be boring, right? Like Superman stories are hard to write because Superman's so powerful. So it's the same problem. But like at the end of the day, Rohan is like he's pretty sure if he needs to, he can kill any set of people. He may have to think about it. It may be hard, but he's going to figure it out, and he'll find a way. And he will. And he's terrified of that. He doesn't want to be that guy who keeps doing that. So, yeah.
But like that's kind of my thing, though. I think that's what I thought, at least. Why he's like, well, why do you think he's so self-deprecating and says like he's not that smart? And I just was like, well, maybe he wants people to underestimate him. Either that, or he's afraid of what he could do.
He's afraid of what he can do, and he doesn't like what he can do. So there's some self-deprecation. I mean, in my interpretation, is some of that.
Also, maybe that's just who he is as well.
That is somewhat who he is, but also some of that self-deprecation. Also, like,
I mean, because there doesn't have to be a deeper reason for everything, but that's.
But a lot of people I know, if they think they're very competent, they lean into self-deprecation so they don't seem so arrogant.
Well, yeah, that too.
that is, in a very significant way, my interpretation of what he does also. He just doesn't want to be an asshole, so he keeps putting himself down. Because if he kept talking about how great he was, he would just seem like an asshole.
Yeah.
Right? So he goes maybe too far in the other direction just to be safe.
And also, like I think he's just like afraid of what he's capable of doing.
Not just afraid of what he does, right? Yeah, absolutely. You see that after the bear thing, and you see it in other places. Yeah, he is afraid.
But like that's the thing, though, and I mean you don't have to spoil if you've answered this question in the other books. But like is he just lying? Personally, I lean on no, because it's way too specific to. Because like if he were just like bullshitting and just thinking it up on the fly, like you would think it would be a little more sloppy. Unless he's like
all about what?
The weapon or whatever he was, whatever he was saying, because he was talking about this weapon. There's like this like.
No. The weapon's a lie. He just needs to get them to the planet. At that point, he's decided I got to get these guys onto the planet. Once they're on the planet, the kaiju will kill them.
Oh, really? So he was just lying about that?
Huh?
He was just lying about that?
Oh, yeah.
Was he lying about what specifically the weapon was? Or just the weapon in general?
That weapon might exist, but it's not on the planet.
Okay, because that's what I was thinking. I'm like, that weapon has to exist. I don't know if it was exactly what he was saying it was.
You don't see it in the next 4 books. Doesn't mean it's not around somewhere. In some form. But don't forget, too, he's a guy who lives in a world where, like, he sits around talking about things like magic weapons all the time. Right? He's a soldier, right? This is what they talk about, right? So he would have these ideas in his mind more fresh than like I would, because I don't live in a world where we have magic weapons, right? Like,
well, yeah.
But magic, there are really magic weapons in the setting.
No. I mean, I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
But
And the specific powers that weapon has that he describes belong to a character we meet in book 2. So it's very conceivable he was just thinking about that power set and how useful it would be, and so it wouldn't be cool if that was it's not clear.
Yeah, but basically he basically tricks them into getting killed by they call it the kaiju.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like he's the most dangerous guy in the room, but he's not necessarily the guy who's like the strongest and the fastest and in a fist fight in like a ring he would always win. That's not who he is. He's the guy who's going to come up with this idea that I'll take him to the planet and I'll keep my calm and they'll get eaten by the giant lizards, right? Like that's what makes him dangerous. He's going to come up with the plan B and the plan C that gets everyone else messed up. He's not the Hulk.
Yeah, I was about to say, like he mentioned, like he said he was like the Runt because he was super sharp.
Yeah, like in like an arm wrestling match, any of those 3 could have beaten him probably.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But none of them are as smart as him. Because that to me is always a more fun character. Like he's really tough, but he's not the toughest, like just punch for punch. He's not the toughest guy. Right? But he's the one who's going to win because he's going to outthink everybody else.
Also, I'm kind of hoping the whole I was doing it to save everyone from just getting wiped out by these like women nuclear bombs, because I like that trope a lot, where it's like I'm doing this to stop the like greater like evil thing going on.
That was true.
That was true.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was true. You get more
Well, I
hints.
also didn't want to go into too specific because I didn't want you to like spoil
No, no,
anything.
oh God, you can read more books or not. That's your call. But in later books, there's definitely like you meet a matron, and it is very clear that like the basic outline of what he was saying is absolutely true. So if you read more books, it really every hint is there that he's just that part of it was true.
But yeah, that
So
ending, I was like, damn. I was like,
yeah, I mean it was in part of it was
what was
the
it like to write
structure.
that? Just like turn it like go like or not saying like he wasn't that all along because like again there's the hints that like he's sharper than he lets on, but like what was it like writing that and where you're like damn like it's cold blooded Rohan.
It was good because I wrote the book in order too. So I wrote that first scene first, right, and then I had to wait until where they're beating him up on the moon,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had to wait until the very end for those characters because those characters don't appear anywhere in the middle of the book,
Yeah,
right?
I know. I was like, when are they gonna show up? Are they like the
Right,
bear
right.
people or something? Like what the hell? And
But that was what I wanted. I wanted you to always have this kind of lurking in the back of your mind, like, is this where these guys come in? Like, no, no, it's not here. Is this where these guys come in? No, no, not here either, right? As you go through the book, 'cause I like stuff like that. Keep you turning the pages, waiting for these guys to show up. And then the final scene was fun, but I mean, it wasn't really. And it's really, and you know what he survived and won because he was able to control his temper. Because if he had lost his temper at that point, and he won because he could control his temper and because he was irritating. He's really good at irritating. Like he says this in some places, like his real strength is how irritating he can be. Because he managed to get them mad really fast. So his snark, right? Him insulting them, that's what got them mad. That's what made the kaiju kill them.
yeah,
So
because
him being
like he
snarky,
mentions that they can sense the like warrior rage or
yeah,
something.
they're empaths just like Wei
It's
Li.
very it was a bit hand wavy, I'll admit.
No, they're empaths just like Wei Li. It's all part of the same magic system. Everyone has that to a smaller or lesser degree. They were designed to do that. That is why the kaiju are there, because this is their function. You don't know I know where they're from and who made them and why they're there. Right? It all fits. But so he basically wins or survives, defeats his enemies with weaponized snark.
Still,
He met,
that was cold blooded, man.
yeah.
Wasn't expecting
Well,
that.
it's an action story. End of the day, I was writing. I wanted to write like an action superhero story, and if there was anything else to it, that was always going to be like the extra. And I wanted on the surface to be like an action story with an action ending, and that was my goal. So that's a goal in every book. All my books. That's always my goal. So I got it.
But I was like,
Mhm.
damn,
Yeah.
cold blooded, man.
Yeah. Well, they threatened to kill the people on the station. I mean, they basically threatened, Tamara and Renth and all his friends. I don't know if they knew the names. I don't think they did. But they basically said, "We'll go to the station and start killing people because you seem to like those people and we're pissed at you." And that's when he's like, "Okay, no, you guys need to die." And a little bit of pride. At some point, because the real turning point where he decides to fight back is he decides that it would be embarrassing to have such stupid people killing him.
Oh
That's in
yeah,
the,
that's
that's in
right.
the
In that like the first line where he's like, "I don't want to die on a moon," like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
Yeah,
he's
my mom
joking
always
about.
said I die in some strange moon. Um, but yeah, ultimately that's the storyline. So I like having things tie together and work together in multiple ways, and that's what
So,
that ending did.
like, was he actually pissed, or was it just kind of like, okay, these people just gotta go, or was it just like
I
cold
I,
pragmatic decision?
I think of it as a very cold, pragmatic decision. But once he decides you're going to go, you're going to go, and he's not going to be nice about it or kind, and you're going to get torn limb from limb by something. That's fine. I mean, don't forget, this is a guy who's been through wars and genocides, and like killing a bunch of people is like not, the retired gunslingers often they in the trope they often are like, I vow never to kill again. That kind of stuff is very common. I didn't go that route. He's like, I'm gonna try real hard not to kill people, but if they make me, I'm totally down for it.
Yeah, I got the whole. I'd prefer not to kill them,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if
I'm trying to cut back on murder, but no promises.
trying to cut, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to
I don't know
cut
if I
back
use
on
that line
murder.
in the book or not. I think I do use that line somewhere in one of the books. But that is his ethos, right? Trying real hard to cut back on murder, but no guarantees.
Yeah,
Because
but that's kind of what I gathered. He's kind of like, I prefer not to kill
if
anyone.
they're threatening people in the station, he's like, okay, you're dead. And then he just does. That's the thing, right? Once he decides they're dead, he does it. And there's nothing they can do about it. Like
But also,
then
kind
after
of like,
that,
I don't know if I was like, I was kind of afraid of this guy, and then I was like, shit, man.
he's a nice guy though.
Yeah, he is a
Don't,
nice guy.
don't cross him. But that's the character. That's the
Sounds kind of
superhero.
gaslighty though. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a cool guy until you make me mad."
But that's the superhero, right? That's like think of it. If Superman got pissed off enough, he could kill every human on Earth,
Yeah.
pretty much, right? Right in the classic Superman stories where there are no other superheroes around, he's got the laser beam eyes. We're all dead. The only reason anyone around him is alive is because he's a nice guy,
Well, yeah.
right? So that's the storyline. That's what I was telling. I was telling that kind of story.
But yeah, he basically is like, I don't want to kill anyone, but if need be, it's gonna happen.
And you know what? They didn't have to force him to go down there. They didn't have to get mad. They could have left him alone and walked away at any time. He didn't trap them.
Oh yeah, I do think it's kind of hilarious to have that like kind of honor code, I guess, because he just left. He's like, yeah, we have a weird thing.
I feel
Or
like
was he
the
bullshitting?
Ildra,
Or was he
the
bullshitting
hybrids
about
have
that?
the hybrids have to have that kind of like almost nonsensical like Bushido, like not the real Bushido that real samurai had in the real like warring
No,
era.
I get what you mean. Like that weird code, like
When they invented in
Romans,
the 1800s to keep them under control,
or like
they
how
invented,
in Romans, like you could just murder a bunch of people, but you can't break a promise.
yes, because the hybrids are super powerful and their dads have to need psychological mechanisms to keep them under control. And I feel like this would be one of them, having them adhere to
Or
this
was
rigid
or was
code of
he
honor.
just bullshitting about that?
No, no, they really do. Most hybrids really do like stick to this like very rigid code of conduct. They've been trained their whole lives that that's the right way to be, and they buy it because they have to be controlled by their fathers, right? That's the whole thing. That's these these mechanisms have to be built into them. Otherwise, they'd be in charge. They're stronger, right? That's the thing about the hybrids. They are in a fight. They are much stronger, right? They are living weapons of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But they're kept under control by the training and the psychological conditioning their parents put them through.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of it that they have this rigid code. Rohan is not and that's his. It's not really the chosen one, but in a way, he's the chosen one only because his dad was weird and didn't quite condition him as much. So he's less rigid in his thinking, and that is fundamentally the only real difference between him and all the other hybrids. What makes him
So are we gonna
special?
learn? So this is probably a silly question, but are we gonna learn who his dad is?
Oh yeah,
Also, is it high or it's probably not Hyperion, but is it Hyperion?
no. Well, none,
Okay.
none of the hybrids can have children.
Oh yeah, that's right. God,
It's sterile.
oh
So
man, I
it
forgot about that.
absolutely cannot be Hyperion. And the fathers, the Ildrak, the pure-blooded male Ildrak are not that tough. They can't like fly around and punch holes in walls and stuff.
So they
They,
literally are just hanging out. So they literally just go to Earth or any of these other planets, and they just bang people. They bang
yeah,
women
yeah,
to
yeah,
get super soldiers out of it. Like,
yeah, yeah. Imagine if you were Viltrumite. Viltrumites weren't that tough, right? But their kids were full-blooded, had the powers of a full Viltrumite. It's like that. So I never really put a number on it. I always imagine that the males are like they're still more than human.
mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know if I never really fully decided. I don't have a fight scene with any of the males in it, and I've never written one. I don't know if I ever will, But in my mind, they're like,
So they can't like fly or do anything like that.
or maybe they could fly like a few feet, but they can't like crack the planetary crust, it's like if you think about like maybe they're the equivalent of like Daredevil, but not Thor, right? Rohan's like Thor power level. His dad is like Daredevil. Maybe he's Captain America, somewhere in that ballpark, but he's not, right. There's levels to it. So in my mind, but the point is they're not punching spaceships. They're not strong enough to fly out and like they're not
pure blood towing spaceships through space. Oh yeah, and Rohan becomes a captain. That's right.
What? He's a captain.
He becomes a captain.
Yeah. Well, he gets his own ship, and you see a lot more of Void Shadow in later books.
Oh yeah, Void Shadow's the one you hate. Right, the name you hate.
I like the character. I don't like the name. I really regret the name. It doesn't roll off the tongue. I wish I named her something else. I was thinking about having her choose a different name for herself because they do that sometimes. They pick new names for themselves. But I haven't done it yet.
Like Insatiable.
Yeah.
I liked Insatiable a lot. I don't know. I mean, as much as I like darker stuff, I like the like real perky, go get 'em kind of characters. Like that's nice to have. When you're not.
I like them too, right? It's fun. It's like the change of pace, and like most of the. To me, like in real grimdark, like everyone is terrible. Everyone is like out for themselves and like selfish and like nasty.
Oh yeah, you also started a thing called Grim Dwarf.
Yeah, that is a grimmer story.
Was that a play on Grimdark? I assume.
Yes, but it's not really a grimdark. It's not a grimdark story. The main character is a little more grim, but that's a straight fantasy. So that's unrelated to the Hybrid Helix. That's more of a slightly sword and sorcery ish. But
it was
this
like an anthology magazine or something.
Yeah, I put one chapter in every issue of my little magazine, and then I'm going to collect them and release them separately.
You're a busy guy, Joe. You're a busy guy, Joe.
Oh God, don't even start. I really am. I bit off more than I can chew in my life.
Well, I mean, if you hadn't done that, then we wouldn't have gotten Wistful Ascending,
Yeah, I didn't really expect much of this book, and I wrote it, and I was like, I'm just going to publish it, and even if it sucks, I always say that. It was like my mantra. Every day I'd sit at the typewriter, even if it sucks, I'm going to write this book.
You wrote it on a literal typewriter? You wrote it on an actual typewriter?
No. It was a keyboard.
Oh, okay.
No,
that would be cool.
Probably a mechanical keyboard, not this one, although this one is really. I got a really nice keyboard right now. No, I only write on a computer. I don't even take notes by hand, like with a pen. I don't do any of that. All my notes are on Google Docs. All the writing is done.
I'm the same way. Yeah, that's
I don't like handwriting. I try, but it feels too permanent. Like I don't like writing anything because then I feel like, well, now the line is done. I can't move it. I can't insert. I can't. So I don't like. Anyway.
But yeah, that ending, I was like, damn. Or well, that ending fight anyway.
Good. I'm glad. That was the intent. Right. That's what I wanted you to say.
And then we're gonna in the next book. I saw some sharks. So he's gonna fight sharks.
Yeah.
That should be
giant sharks. Giant sharks with legs.
That sounds so absurd when you say that.
So
you've sold me, Joe. I really liked Wistful Ascending. I mean, I won't. I mean, I don't want to sound like I underestimated this book. I'm like, I'm sure I'm gonna have a good time with it. It's gonna be a good time. It was a good time. But there's also this stuff I wasn't expecting. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm in. I'm excited.
That was the goal, right? I'm trying to sneak a little bit of depth in there behind a good time.
Well, I think you did it because
Thank you.
This had depth, but it was also great.
Thank you.
And it was like, and that was I asked you at the beginning, like, why didn't you do this as a comic? Because I was like, oh man, this would be a great comic if they put it out. I mean, well, if
I don't have the resources. I don't have the resources. If I could draw, I might be on a very different life path. I might be doing indie comics if I could draw myself, but I never picked up this skill. So
But yeah, it's good. It's a good book.
I'm glad you liked it. I really
JCM
am.
Berne. So
Yeah.
I think I saw someone ask what JCM meant. Is that like your actual initials, or is that
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
just make them up?
No, those are my name. If you look on so if you look on this is more information than you need, but many forms only give you one middle initial. So like my credit card says Joseph C. Byrne because that's my first middle. But if you look at like my birth certificate or my driver's license, I have two middle names. So it's Joseph Chaim Moshe Byrne. So JCM. Those are my actual initials. There was no like made up anything. I mean, I don't usually use the M, like I said, because most forms don't have space for two middle initials. But it's really my full name. So I think I just thought it sounded cooler than Joe. I don't really know. I honestly, I struggle more with what to use as my name on the book than anything I put in the book. Like I didn't agonize over a single detail in the story the way I agonized over what to use for my name. I mean, I spent like 2 weeks. I was like, I don't know what to do. What should I call myself? And people, I don't like. I think Joe sounds a little too like lowbrow or low
Could have been.
rank.
I mean, it could have been a good like if he had went in the comics. Could have been like Jack Kirby, Joe Byrne. That has a nice ring to it.
I guess, but I went with JCM, and I don't know if it was the right call or not, but I did it. And then I was like, I'm just going to stick to JCM. No one will know my actual name, and that didn't last. It's weird having people call me JCM like face to face, like in a situation.
It'd be kind of. That was what I was gonna say. I'm like, it'd be kind of awkward of being like, so JCM, what was it like writing this book?
Yeah, and some people do, and I don't like hate it, but I'm like, it feels weird. And then my Twitter handle is Joe Byrne. I didn't want a new Twitter account, so I just stuck with that. So I'm like, oh, everyone knows I'm Joe. So now what's fun is if I comment on someone's like YouTube video, my YouTube is JCM. So if they say, "Oh, Joe's commenting," that's cool because it means they know me. Because the thing doesn't say Joe, it says JCM. But if they call me Joe, I'm like, oh, so it's a little exciting for me if like I commented on like Philip Chase's video and he said, "Oh, Joe," or I'm like, Philip Chase knows who I am. I thought that was really cool. A little moment in the sunshine for me.
But I think that's all. Well,
All right, that's quite a bit. I'm glad you had thoughts about it. That's really cool. That was my goal.
Oh, I think it ends. They all eat together. So there you go. More eating.
More, yeah, a lot of eating.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me. I like the suit guy and the like guy who runs like the restaurant. That's when I love how that's when he draws the line when they're like, yeah, we got a visit from some people. He's like, I like that. That's where he crosses the line. Like he's just like, oh no,
they're messing with my egg guy.
They're messing with my food guy and my
breakfast guy.
Oh, it's on.
Yeah, Pop's House of Breakfast, where you can do anything, but you can't ask where the eggs come from.
Yeah.
I had fun with that.
Yeah, this is a good book, Joe.
Thank you.
I'm definitely going to read more. Now, I won't promise when I'll do it, but I'm definitely going to promise I will do it.
I'll send you Return of the Griffin.
I would like that. And thank you, again, for graciously providing this copy of Wistful
More than
Ascending.
welcome. I'll send you the next one.
Yeah, my mom was like, who is this? I'm like, it's a friend of mine. It's okay.
There you go.
Because, yeah, my parents and also me as well, we get kind of paranoid about that stuff. I'm like, don't worry, friend of mine, we're good. So
I have a lot of booktuber and reviewer addresses in my Amazon account. A lot. This is no way to say this without sounding a little creepy and stalkery, but I'm like, I know what all these people on YouTube, like all the booktubers, I know what their porches look like. I mean, I don't like keep records of it, right? But like, because I'll get a picture like, oh, we delivered your order, and here's the porch, and I'm like, that's not my house. Like, what the hell? And then it takes me a minute, and then I go, oh yeah, I sent a book to this person. So the delivery guy takes a picture of the book on like the package on the porch, and they send it to me because I'm the person who sent the book. And I'm like, oh, I know it. Anyway, I don't keep the pictures. I'm not,
Yeah.
not weird. I don't
Well,
know.
thanks for
It's a
clarifying.
little, it's a little weird, but it's not that weird. Anyway,
I mean,
thanks for having me,
I
Brittany.
haven't read a lot of self-pub stuff. I've only read so far. I've read
Well, Jason,
this, and I read Way of a Dan,
right again.
and I read Thrice from Andrew Meredith.
Nice. Yeah, and I read Thrice. I read the sequel. I have not read Brave Dan. It's on my list. There's a lot of stuff
My
depending on
friend
what you're.
Curtis did self-pub before he kind of went off in the Weird House direction,
Okay.
which is like an indie publisher for horror. I digress.
I don't do horror. There's
But
a
you know,
lot of.
I did make it a goal this year to read more indie stuff, and this is one of the good ones I've read. So I've actually liked most of what I've read, but you know, this one I liked. So
Well, yeah. The thing about indie is,
thanks for
sure,
carrying the torch of modern superhero stuff, or carrying the torch of
yeah,
superhero stories.
someone's got to. Someone's got to. Thanks for having me, Britton. I really enjoyed this talk.
This was
A
great.
lot of fun. A lot of
And
fun.
when I do return to Griffin, whenever the hell that's gonna be, I'll have you on again.
Okay, we can see if you spot all the comic book references. There's a ton more in that book than there was in this book.
Well, as I like to do before I end these type of things, if you have any social media, feel free to shill and be shameless.
I'm on Twitter at Joe Berne 1. I have a Patreon at JCM Berne. I have a website, jcmberne.com. If you go to the Patreon, you can sign up for the free tier. You don't have to pay, and you can access all the issues of Grimdorf magazine, of which there are currently 17, releasing almost every week. Although I missed this week for reasons outside
That's
my control.
impressive, Joe. You managed to get 17 out?
Yeah, but most are only 3 stories. So it's like a chapter of my thing and then 2 other things. So it's not a big magazine, but yeah, 17 issues are out. That's every week.
Yeah, I remember teasing you. I'm like, yeah, you didn't mention this when we had our podcast episode. He's like, I didn't come up with it yet.
Yeah, that was a spur of the moment thing that I've been having a lot of fun with. And I have 4 books in the Hybrid Helix. Book 5 is coming out this summer, and Partial Function, which is a related fantasy novel, is out.
Wait, does it take place in the same universe?
It's kind of a spoiler, but yes. Yes, it does.
All right.
But it's not. But there's no crossover. It's not really clear that it's like the same time frame. So it could be like 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years in the future, but it's the same setting.
Oh, okay. Well, you're just going all over the place then.
Yeah.
But thank you, Joe, for giving some of your time talking about Wistful Ascending.
That's my pleasure.
I know I was probably the first one who came and asked you to come on this show and talk about your book. I'm kidding, of course. But thank you, Joe. I appreciate this a lot. And I'm finally glad we managed to get something where we didn't have to wait for too long. Because my God, that was driving me crazy.
It was just the 2 of us. It's the third one. The third are the problem. And the other.
Be more consistent than everyone else out there. But anyway, thank you, Joe, for coming on.
All right, man. My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Until next time.